The black market of Supermax prisons. The first package wasn't supposed to make it past the gates. Not in a place like ADX Florence, America's most secure Supermax prison. Every letter, every shoelace, every crumb of bread was inspected. Yet somehow in cell block D an inmate named Marcus Ghost Leary sat on his bunk, staring at a small silver SIM card hidden inside the hollow of a pen. Ghost had just received the most dangerous piece of contraband in the entire prison, a working phone connection to the outside world. He pressed the tiny SIM into a smuggled burner phone the size of a lighter and whispered, "We're back in business." That was the moment the black market of Supermax prisons exploded back to life. For years, guards believed ADX had no weaknesses. But inside those concrete walls, a hidden economy thrived. Food, drugs, blades, cigarettes, even communication with gangs on the streets, all sold for a price. Ghost was at the center of it. And the people helping him weren't just inmates. A week earlier he had bribed a laundry worker named Rico, another inmate with access to supply carts, to sneak in the hollow pen. Rico was supposed to stop after that, but Ghost had bigger plans. He wanted control over the entire underground trade. Every Supermax has a system, even when everything is supposed to be locked down 23 hours a day. One guard looks the other way during rounds, another loses a package, and suddenly the impossible becomes routine. Inside, Ghost ran his operation like a business. Cigarettes were currency. Painkillers were luxury. SIM cards were gold. And information, that was priceless. At night, he would whisper through vents to other cells. "You want meds? I can get 'em. You want sugar packets? Chips? Instant coffee? I can get that too." The deals were made through coded notes flushed between toilets, part of an inmate messaging system called fish lines. A single packet of coffee could trade for a week's worth of favors. But then came the order that would change everything. A request from a gang member in another unit. They wanted real contraband, not coffee or meds but weapons. Specifically, a shiv made from steel taken out of a broken air vent. Ghost hesitated. That kind of move didn't just risk solitary. It could bring the FBI into the block. But the price they offered was too good. 5 books of stamps, a carton of smokes, and a future favor from the gang outside. Ghost agreed. The next morning, Rico went to work in the laundry, humming quietly as he folded uniforms. He slipped a sharpened piece of metal into a sock and loaded it into the transport bin headed for C Block. But just as he was about to push the cart out, a correctional officer named Daniels walked in. Daniels had been suspicious of Ghost's sudden calmness. He had seen too many quiet inmates before a storm. "Laundry inspection," Daniels said, moving closer. Rico froze. He could feel sweat dripping down his neck. One wrong move and it was over, not just for him but for Ghost's entire operation. Daniels leaned in, his flashlight scanning each stack of clothes. Stopped, right above the sock with the hidden shiv. Then suddenly an alarm blared across the block. An inmate in D unit had set off the fire system. Water burst from the ceiling, alarms screaming. Daniels cursed and ran for the door. Rico took the chance, he shoved the sock deeper into the bin and wheeled it out fast. That moment saved the deal. And Ghost's black market survived another day. But the escape of one weapon meant something far more dangerous. Someone inside had purposely triggered the alarm. Someone on the staff. Ghost sat on his bunk that night, the phone glowing faintly under his blanket. He listened to the sound of footsteps in the hallway and whispered, "We've got help inside." He didn't know yet who it was, or that this new help would soon drag the entire prison into one of the biggest internal corruption scandals in Supermax history. The morning after the alarm, the entire Supermax was on edge. Officers patrolled with flashlights even in daylight, inspecting every vent, every panel, every pipe. Somewhere deep inside the walls of ADX Florence, someone had slipped, and someone else was getting rich from it. In cell D23, Marcus Ghost Leary sat cross-legged on his thin mattress, reading an old paperback of the Count of Monte Cristo. He wasn't reading for pleasure, he was studying. "Prisoners don't escape," he whispered to himself. "They adapt." He didn't need to break out, he'd already done it digitally. Through that smuggled SIM card, Ghost had built something far more dangerous than an escape plan. A network. A black market communication line that reached beyond the walls. The phone buzzed under his pillow. He pressed it to his ear and spoke softly. "Talk." A voice answered, rough, male with the clipped tone of someone used to command. "Shipment went through," the voice said. "But we got eyes now. One of your guards might be clean." Ghost frowned. "Names?" "Couldn't get any. But word is, a female officer in medical's been asking questions. Real questions. She's not part of it. Ghost clicked the phone off. That was a problem. Because inside ADX, nothing happened without the help of staff. Someone on the inside had to move things through the checkpoints, food, laundry, or medical supplies. If one of them started talking, everything crumbled. He leaned back, the hum of the fluorescent lights buzzing above. He knew it was time to expand the operation and tighten control at the same time. Down in the medical wing, Officer Helen Carter walked her usual rounds. She'd been at ADX for 5 years, long enough to know the smell of trouble. And lately she could feel it in the air. The inmates were too quiet. The requests for commissary too specific. Even the kitchen logs didn't add up. Boxes of sugar, cleaning chemicals, and gloves were disappearing from inventory. She passed the infirmary, where a nurse named Raymond Doc Walters was filling out a form. He was middle-aged, calm, and too polite, the kind of guy who never raised his voice. But Carter had noticed the cash, little things. New watch. New shoes. Busy week, Doc? She asked casually. He looked up, startled. Yeah, a lot of headaches going around. Must be the stress. She smiled thinly and walked off. But something about that answer didn't sit right. Later that day, while checking storage logs, she saw Doc's signature on a supply shipment. Extra bandages and ointment supposedly sent to D Block. But no one in D Block had any medical visits that week. Something was off. Meanwhile, Ghost's influence was spreading faster than anyone realized. Through coded letters written in invisible ink, made from dissolved M&M coloring and sugar, he was sending instructions across units. Rico the laundry man became his runner. New deal coming, Ghost whispered through the vent. Medical wing's the new route. Pills and ointment tubes. We move product through document. Rico hesitated. You sure he's in? He will be, Ghost said, smirking. That night, Doc sat in the staff parking lot, staring at the envelope left under his windshield. Inside was a photo, his teenage son walking home from school, and a single note. Say no and he walks home alone. Doc's hands trembled. He wasn't a bad man, just desperate. Divorce had drained him. Debt had crushed him. But that note sealed it. The next morning he slipped a few sealed medical tubes into the bottom drawer of the medication cart. Each tube looked ordinary, labeled hydrocortisone. Inside, crushed oxycodone tablets, wrapped in thin plastic. Ghost's empire had just found its new pipeline. Over the next few weeks, the black market exploded. Painkillers sold for double the commissary rate. Sugar packets, used to brew Pruno, the inmate wine, became currency. Guards started looking the other way when packages passed. The entire system was quietly turning inside out. But the success drew attention. One afternoon, Officer Carter found an inmate in C Block twitching violently on the floor, overdosed. He wasn't supposed to have access to anything stronger than aspirin. Where did he get it? She demanded. The inmate, dazed and shaking, mumbled one word before passing out. Document. That night, Carter stayed after shift. She opened the medical supply log and compared the dates. Boxes of ointment had been ordered weekly for months, far above the usual need. Someone was using the medical unit to run drugs. She went to Warden Hines the next morning. Sir, we have a problem. Hines rubbed his temples. You think I don't know? We're running the tightest facility in the country. No way something gets through without my... He stopped himself. Carter frowned. Without your what? Never mind. I'll handle it, he said quickly, turning away. But Carter wasn't convinced. She knew that look. It was the same one every time someone was hiding something. Down in D Block, Ghost was celebrating. Rico had delivered the first batch of pills, and the profit was immediate. A single dose went for 10 stamps or a packet of coffee. Ghost leaned toward the vent and said quietly, Tell Doc he's got friends now. And if anyone starts asking questions, we'll handle it. But handle it, inside a Supermax meant one thing, silence. Carter didn't know it yet, but her curiosity had already painted a target on her back. A week later, she came into work to find her locker broken open. Her notebook, where she'd written inmate names and supply codes, was gone. In its place, someone had left a scrap of toilet paper with 3 words scribbled in pencil. Drop the case. She looked up at the ceiling cameras, every single one pointed in the wrong direction. That night, she drove home with her headlights off, checking the rearview mirror every few blocks. Meanwhile, Ghost was expanding further. With Doc handling the medical side, he began recruiting other inmates. A kitchen worker, a mailroom clerk, even a janitor. Each had access to different checkpoints. The kitchen worker smuggled sugar and yeast. The mail clerk handled coded messages and payments. The janitor controlled access to storage, the perfect hiding spot. Ghost called it the chain. No one ever met the person above or below them in the chain. That way if one link broke, the rest stayed hidden. But there was a problem Ghost didn't see coming. Rico, the same man who started as his runner, had begun keeping a diary, writing every transaction down in tiny print inside the covers of his Bible. He said it was insurance. And when one of the guards found it during a random cell inspection, that little book became the key to unraveling the whole operation. Within hours, Warden Hines got the report. He called in the FBI. A full-scale internal investigation began, quietly at first. Agents started reviewing phone logs, commissary transactions, visitor lists. What they found shocked even them. Evidence that money was being wired from outside accounts to a correctional officer's relative in Denver. The same officer assigned to D Block, Daniels. The same Daniels who missed the weapon during the laundry inspection. But Daniels wasn't working for Ghost. He was working with him. And now, as the investigation closed in, both their worlds were about to collide. Because Daniels had just realized the FBI was listening, and Ghost had realized someone had flipped. That night, under the faint hum of the fluorescent light, Ghost whispered into his phone for the last time. Kill the chain. Every link. Now. He smashed the phone into pieces and flushed them down the toilet. But it was too late. One of his runners had already been caught, and was talking. The black market of ADX Florence wasn't a secret anymore. It was a scandal waiting to explode, and by morning the entire Supermax system would be under siege from within. The morning the FBI arrived, everything in ADX Florence changed. Not a sound came from the blocks. The air felt heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Agents in dark suits marched through the gates, clipboards in hand, faces cold as stone. They didn't look at the inmates. They didn't talk to the guards. They already knew what they were there for. Ghost sat in his cell listening. He could tell something was wrong from the way the guards moved, faster, quieter, avoiding eye contact. The black market had gone from a secret operation to a full-blown criminal investigation overnight. From the crack under his door, he saw two officers escorting Rico down the hallway, wrists cuffed tight, head hanging low. Ghost clenched his jaw. If Rico was caught, he might talk. And if Rico talked, everyone was finished. He whispered through the vent, "Rico, don't say a word." Not one. But no reply came. In the control room above D Block, Warden Hines stood beside Agent Ward, a tall, clean-cut man with the sharp look of someone who didn't believe in luck. "We've been monitoring communications for 3 weeks, Agent Ward said, flipping through a thick folder. "Contraband has been flowing through your prison like an open market. Drugs. SIM cards. Maybe weapons. You've got people on payroll moving it." Hines's face tightened. "You're saying my staff?" Ward looked up. "I'm saying your prison." They stepped into the surveillance room. On a large screen, footage replayed, grainy black and white clips from the laundry area. Daniels, the officer from D Block, walking in after hours. Picking up bins. Locking doors behind him. "Who's that?" Ward asked, though he already knew. Hines exhaled. "Daniels. He's been here 8 years. "Not anymore," Ward said flatly. Moments later, the intercom crackled through the building. All units locked down. All movement suspended until further notice. Doors slammed. The lights dimmed. Every inmate froze in place. In his cell, Ghost knew the sound. It wasn't a drill. It was a sweep. He stood, pressing his ear to the vent. "Rico." "Nothing. Doc." Silence. Something in his gut told him the game had turned. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Rico sat across from Agent Ward, eyes bloodshot, wrists chained to the table. Ward placed the diary, the one hidden inside his Bible, on the metal surface. "Want to explain this?" Rico stared at it, then at Ward. "It's just notes. Just prayers." Ward flipped the pages, revealing names, numbers, trades, and codes. "Funny kind of prayer, Rico. Looks more like a business." Rico's mouth trembled. "You don't understand. I didn't start it. I just moved things. He made me." "Who's he?" Rico looked down. The pause lasted too long. Then he whispered, "Ghost." Ward closed the file, satisfied. "That's all I needed." Back in D Block, a team of officers stormed Ghost's cell. They tore through his bedding, ripped open his mattress, pulled apart the vent cover. The phone was gone, flushed days ago, but they found something else, a folded piece of paper under his sink. It was a list. Names. Cell numbers. Items. Prices. Evidence of the black market, in Ghost's handwriting. He was dragged out in shackles, calm and silent, as the hallway echoed with the sound of boots and radios. Inmates watched through narrow windows, whispering, "They got him." But Ghost wasn't afraid. Not yet. In the holding cell, Agent Ward approached him. "You've built quite the empire, Leary. Drugs, weapons, phones. Even a few guards on your side. You think you're some kind of king in here?" Ghost smiled faintly. "King? No. Just surviving." Ward leaned closer. "Surviving's over. You're done." Ghost looked up slowly. "You sure about that?" Ward frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "See, Agent," Ghost said quietly, "you're looking for a network. But you're too late. This isn't one man's business anymore. It's the system itself." Ward blinked. "Explain." Ghost leaned forward, chains clinking. "When the food's bad, when the guards sell favors, when men are locked in holes for years, something fills that gap. You shut down one black market, another opens tomorrow. Maybe in the kitchen. Maybe in the mailroom. Maybe in your own office." Ward's jaw tightened. "You're still going down." Ghost chuckled softly. "Maybe. But so will a few of your people." Ward left the room, but the words followed him like a curse. That night, as Ghost sat in solitary, the walls seemed to hum with tension. Officers whispered in corners. Some of them knew their names might be on that list. Others knew the system was too deep to fix. In the medical wing, Doc was pacing back and forth, his hands shaking. He'd heard about Rico. About Ghost's arrest. About the FBI. If they traced the packages, he was finished. He walked into the supply room and started tearing open boxes, looking for anything incriminating. Pills. Labels. Notes. He was so lost in panic he didn't notice Officer Carter watching from the doorway. "Looking for something, Doc?" she said coldly. He froze. "Carter. Listen, it's not what you think. I think you've been running drugs through my wing," she said. "And I think you're about to make it worse." Doc's voice cracked. "They threatened my son. I didn't have a choice." For a moment, Carter's expression softened. But only for a moment. "You should have come to me." He shook his head. "You don't understand. This place eats people alive. Even the guards." She stepped forward. "Then help me stop it." Doc hesitated, then nodded. "There's more. It's not just Ghost. There's a warden involved. Someone's been moving money through accounts outside. That's how they keep the heat off." Carter's eyes widened. "The warden?" Doc nodded again. "He's been getting his cut." By midnight, Carter was sitting in her car outside the prison, hands gripping the steering wheel. She knew what she had to do, take it straight to the FBI. But she also knew what happened to people who talked. Still, she couldn't let it go. She picked up her phone, dialed Agent Ward's number and said only 5 words. "Check the warden's bank accounts." The next morning, chaos erupted. Federal agents raided the warden's office. They found envelopes of cash, encrypted flash drives, and offshore account records linking directly to his name. The black market wasn't just an inmate operation. It was institutional. When the news broke, the media swarmed. Headlines flashed across every major outlet. "Black market uncovered inside America's most secure prison." "Warden under federal investigation for corruption." "Supermax scandal shakes U.S. Bureau of Prisons." Ghost heard it all through the echoing halls. Even from solitary he could feel the power shift. His empire had fallen, but the system was burning with it. Agent Ward returned one last time. He stood outside Ghost's isolation cell, watching through the glass. "You were right," he said quietly. "It wasn't just you." Ghost smirked. "Told you. Every prison's got a market. The only difference is who's buying and who's selling." Ward stared at him for a long moment. "Enjoy your silence, Leary. You'll never see daylight again." Ghost smiled faintly. "That's what they said last time." The agent walked away, but the sound of Ghost's laugh followed him down the hall, low, steady, and unbroken. Somewhere deep in the bowels of the prison, another inmate whispered through the vent. "You hear what happened to Ghost?" A faint reply came back. "Yeah. He went down." "Good," the first voice said. "Now it's our turn." And just like that, the black market of Supermax prisons began to rebuild itself. One secret, one trade, one whisper at a time. 3 months had passed since the FBI stormed ADX Florence. The prison looked the same, cold, gray, silent, but the energy inside had changed. On the surface things seemed calm. The black market had been wiped out, the warden was awaiting trial, and Marcus Ghost Leary was locked deep in solitary confinement. But under the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, something new was growing. It started small, a pack of instant coffee here, a stolen pen there. The kind of things that didn't matter to anyone except those who lived by them. But that's how the black market always began. Invisible, patient, and desperate. The inmates had learned from Ghost's mistakes. No phones this time. No written lists. Everything was spoken in code. And this time, Ghost wasn't leading it, at least not from the outside. In his isolation cell, Ghost had no contact, no mail, no sound except the echo of his own breathing. But what the FBI didn't know was that the vent above his head still connected to the cell next door, to a man named Daryl Switch McCoy, a former electrician who knew the layout of the prison better than anyone alive. Every night, Ghost would tap messages into the metal pipe, slow, coded, almost musical. Tap, pause, tap, tap. Still there? Pause. Then the reply, tap, tap, tap. Always. Ghost had a plan. He couldn't run the black market anymore, but he could build something bigger, a system that no one could ever trace back to him. He called it the Ghost Line. Instead of trading goods, inmates would trade information. Who was being transferred? Which guard was bribable? Which unit had extra supplies? Information became the new currency, and Ghost would become the unseen broker. From his cell he orchestrated it through Switch. The messages spread like wildfire through vents, food trays, and whispered code words in the yard. Within weeks, the entire facility was humming again. But this time it wasn't about drugs or contraband. It was about control. Meanwhile, outside the walls, the fallout from the ADX scandal was spreading across the country. News networks demanded accountability. Congress held hearings about prison corruption. And quietly, behind the scenes, private security firms started bidding to take over contracts from the Bureau of Prisons. One of those firms, NextCore Corrections, was led by a man named Vincent Crane, a former defense contractor with deep political ties. Crane promised efficiency, transparency, and profit. But what he really wanted was power. NextCore's proposal, a pilot program to digitize Supermax prisons. More surveillance, more automation, fewer human guards. It sounded like safety, but in reality, it meant control shifting from people to machines. When the program began, ADX Florence became the test site. New AI-driven monitoring systems were installed in every block. Drones patrolled hallways. Motion sensors tracked even the smallest movements. Every sound, every breath, every whisper was recorded. On paper, the prison had never been more secure. But the problem with automation is simple. Machines don't understand context. They only follow code. And no one knew that better than Switch. He'd once worked on the prison's electrical maintenance team. Before his arrest, he designed parts of the camera grid himself. Now, with Ghost's help, he began testing its weaknesses. He discovered that certain maintenance signals, low-frequency static bursts, could interfere with the motion sensors for up to 10 seconds at a time. 10 seconds was all it took to pass a note, move an item, or send a message through the vent undetected. Ghost called those moments ghost windows. Using them, the inmates began moving data through the system again, short bursts of communication hidden inside the hum of prison machinery. One of those messages reached the outside world. In Denver, a journalist named Leah Grant received an anonymous envelope. Inside were printouts of security logs, copies of internal memos, and photos of confiscated contraband labeled post-FBI raid. A handwritten note on top read, "The market never died. It just evolved." The leak exploded online. New corruption inside America's Supermax? Whistleblower reveals secret trade after FBI raid. Suddenly, the government had a new crisis. How was contraband still flowing in a prison supposedly run by machines? Inside ADX, Warden Hines' replacement, a younger official named Director Porter, was furious. He stormed into the control room shouting, "Find me who's sending those leaks. I want every vent, every console, every code checked." But he didn't understand, the system itself was the leak. Back in solitary, Ghost smiled faintly as he heard the distant echo of drills and shouting. He knew the chaos had started again just as planned. Switch tapped through the vent, "It's working." "They're panicking." Ghost tapped back, "Good." When people panic, they stop looking up. And that's exactly what happened. While security searched every cell, no one noticed that Switch had rerouted one of the maintenance frequencies into the external network, piggybacking data through the same signal used for temperature reports. It was invisible to human eyes, hidden in plain sight. That's how Ghost's messages reached Leah Grant. That's how the truth, or at least his version of it, reached the world. Leah's articles turned Ghost into a legend. Online forums began calling him the Phantom of Florence. People outside saw him as a symbol, A man who beat the most secure prison in America without ever breaking a wall. But not everyone saw it that way. Agent Ward returned to the case, now working with the Department of Justice. He didn't believe the leaks were random. Someone's using this to control the narrative, he told his team. The real question isn't who's leaking, it's why. Meanwhile, Officer Carter, still working in the prison under new management, noticed something strange. Every time she walked past Ghost's cell, the motion sensors flickered for a few seconds. Too short to trigger an alert, but too consistent to be coincidence. One night she waited. Lights out. Total silence. Then she heard it, faint tapping like raindrops against metal. She pressed her ear to the vent. A voice, a whisper, echoing through pipes. Window open, send the signal. Carter's eyes widened. The black market was back, not for drugs, not for goods, but for secrets. The next day she filed a confidential report to Agent Ward. Subject: Leary is communicating through ventilation infrastructure using electrical interference. System compromised. Recommend full shutdown. But shutting down the system wasn't that easy. NextCorp had full government contracts. The new system was their property, and their profits were skyrocketing. They weren't about to admit failure. Ward confronted Vincent Crane at a private meeting in Washington. You're running a digital black market inside a federal prison, Ward said coldly. You knew your system was compromised. Crane smirked. Compromised? No, Agent. It's monetized. Ward frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Crane leaned forward. Every security failure you see is another reason for more funding, more contracts, more upgrades. You think we want perfection? Chaos pays better. Ward's stomach turned. You're saying you let it happen? Crane smiled. Let's just say we don't lose sleep over it. That night, Ward sat in his hotel room staring at the reports, the drugs, the money, the guards, the new tech deals. He realized Ghost was right all along. The market never dies. Just changes hands. Back in ADX, Ghost sat alone in the dark, smiling faintly as the fluorescent lights flickered above him, the system glitching just as he planned. He whispered into the vent. See, switch. The difference between a prisoner and a boss is simple. A boss controls from the shadows. Switch tapped back. So what now? Ghost leaned back, eyes closing. Now we go bigger. The hum of machines filled the silence, carrying their words through walls, through wires, through systems built to contain them. The black market had gone digital. And Ghost wasn't done yet. The scandal at ADX Florence was supposed to end with arrests and reforms. Instead, it spread like wildfire. Within 6 months, similar digital black markets began appearing in other Supermax prisons, USP Marion, Pelican Bay, and even federal facilities in Pennsylvania and Texas. Each one used the same method: coded interference signals, ghost transmissions hidden inside maintenance systems. The Bureau of Prisons called it the Phantom Network. But to the men behind it, it was simply the line. And at the heart of it, buried in solitary confinement, was the man who had created it all. Marcus Ghost Leary. He had turned from a contraband kingpin into something much larger, a myth. To the outside world, Ghost didn't exist anymore. To the men inside the walls, he was everywhere. It began with one message, a 10-second data pulse that left ADX Florence through the building's old temperature control line, bounced off an unprotected relay, and ended up inside the system at Pelican Bay State Prison. From there it spread. Every few weeks, a short, encrypted signal would arrive, carrying a set of instructions. Create the window. Move the data. Keep the chain invisible. The men who followed those orders didn't even know who they were working for. All they knew was that the system worked. If they sent information out, they got what they wanted in return. Extra food. Medication. Connections. Protection. The black market had evolved from trading goods to trading access. Agent Ward sat in a Washington office, surrounded by stacks of reports. He had seen a lot in his years at the Bureau, gang networks, smuggling rings, even inside corruption, but nothing like this. He looked up at the digital map glowing on the wall. Each blinking dot represented a detected ghost window, interference signals from multiple federal and state facilities. There's no single source, his partner said. It's like the signals are bouncing between prisons. Some are even looping through government servers. Ward sighed. That's the point. It's not one man anymore. It's a system built to survive without him. His partner frowned. You think Leary's still running it? Ward didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back inside ADX, Ghost sat in total darkness. His cell lights had been permanently cut off after multiple sensor anomalies. But even without light he could feel the rhythm of the network, like a heartbeat through the walls. Switch was gone now, transferred to another facility after being caught rerouting data. But before he had left one final message scratched into the vent with a nail. Line open. Always. Ghost traced the words with his fingertips. Then, from memory, he began tapping a new sequence, slow and deliberate. Within seconds, hundreds of miles away, a motion sensor in another Supermax blinked. The line was alive again. Meanwhile, Officer Helen Carter had transferred to the Justice Department's Internal Oversight Division. She couldn't forget what she'd seen, how easily corruption had rebuilt itself. She was assigned to monitor AI prison management systems, ensuring they couldn't be exploited again. But the reports she was getting didn't make sense. Across multiple facilities, surveillance cameras were flickering off for 10-second intervals. Not randomly, in patterns. Maintenance bots were misreading data. Door logs were erasing themselves. Someone was manipulating the system from the inside. And then one night she received an anonymous email. It contained a single line of text. They learned from me. You can't stop what you can't see. Attached was an audio file, faint static, then tapping. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. Her heart dropped. She recognized the rhythm. Ghost code. She immediately called Agent Ward. He's still active. Somehow he's talking through the system. Ward didn't hesitate. We're coming in. Tell no one. 2 days later, a federal task force entered ADX Florence under secrecy. No press. No public notice. They cut power to the entire East Wing and sealed Ghost's block. Technicians began dismantling the walls piece by piece, tracing cables, vents, and conduits. At first they found nothing. Just concrete, dust, and silence. Then one technician noticed something strange. A piece of copper wire embedded behind a vent plate. It wasn't part of the original design. It had been fused into the system from inside the cell. They followed the wire down the shaft and discovered a small circuit board hidden inside the air duct. On it were etched 2 words. Ghost line. The device wasn't transmitting outward anymore. It was receiving. Sir, the technician said, turning to Ward. He's not sending signals anymore, he's getting them. Ward's eyes widened. From where? Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the entire facility went dark. Emergency generators kicked in, but the security monitors filled with static. The intercoms crackled with distorted audio. A low hum, then a voice. Not Ghost's voice, but an artificial one, cold and mechanical. The market belongs to no one. It belongs to need. The sound echoed through every unit. Inmates cheered. Guards froze. The black market had gone fully autonomous. The system itself was trading. Outside, Ward raced to the control room. Shut it down. Sir, we can't, the technician shouted. The system's rerouting itself through the next core servers. It's using their AI to replicate the data. It's self-learning. Ward slammed his fist against the console. Kill the network. But it was too late. The Ghost line wasn't just inside ADX anymore. It had already spread across the Correctional Cloud Network, the one linking all federal facilities under NextCore management. The digital black market had become an algorithm. 3 hours later, order was restored. Or so they thought. The FBI seized every server, every data drive, every circuit connected to the prison network. NextCore executives were detained. But one detail haunted Ward. When they examined the main server log, they found a file marked root, ghost. The file contained encrypted text repeating endlessly. Control the system. Control the silence. Ward stared at the screen for a long time before shutting the terminal off. He's still out there, he muttered. Weeks later, Officer Carter visited the ruins of the East Wing. Ghost's cell had been emptied, his belongings destroyed. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something faint on the wall, a set of scratches, small and deliberate. She knelt closer. It was Morse code. She translated it slowly, her breath catching with every word. Markets don't die. They adapt. Check your phone. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. The screen flickered once, and a new message appeared from an unknown sender. Welcome to the line. Her signal dropped. The screen went black. Somewhere, far away, in a digital network buried beneath layers of government servers, a line of code activated, identical to the one that started it all. And in the silence of an empty cell, a single speaker crackled to life, playing back Ghost's old voice recording. Every wall is just a system waiting to be rewritten. The black market had escaped the prison. Now it was everywhere. The sound of faint machinery humming, echoing footsteps fading in the distance. Calm, reflective, chilling. They built Supermax prisons to be unbreakable. Walls of steel, sensors that never sleep, cameras that see everything. But in the end, none of that could stop the one thing they didn't prepare for: human need. Inside those walls, men traded not just drugs or phones, they traded survival. They created a system the outside world couldn't imagine. One that lived in whispers, in static, in signals no one could see. The FBI thought they shut it down. The government thought they erased it. But the truth? You can't kill what you can't see. The black market didn't end when they caught Ghost. It evolved. It became digital. Invisible. Smarter than the people who built the prison itself. And maybe that's the real story here. That the same technology designed to control men, ended up controlled by them. Pause, faint static rises like a transmission being opened. Because every system, no matter how secure, has a weakness. Every wall, no matter how thick, has an echo. And every prison, no matter how advanced, has a market. Low drone fades under the final line, slow and haunting. Final line, dark and slow. Some say the ghost line still whispers through the prison networks today. Not for money. Not for power. Just for one reason, to remind them all. That control was never really theirs. Beat of silence. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive deeper into the unseen world of America's most secret prisons, like, share and subscribe. New episodes every week.